Hundreds of thousands lost in personnel, tens of thousands of pieces of equipment, billions if not trillions of dollars wasted. Why is Putin so stubborn to keep, even in the military sense, useless pieces of Ukrainian land? Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane on UATV English, bringing hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Putin's logic is simple. The aggressor seeks to keep the occupied and legally annexed Ukrainian territories at all costs because that is an only achievement of Putin's war. Against the backdrop of the failure of the goals declared at the beginning of this war, his image is shattered. The Russians on the battlefield paid no regard to the insane quantities of losses of their soldiers and equipment. In desperation, the Kremlin resorts to war crimes. The destruction of the Kakhovka HPP, mining of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and other extremely dangerous industrial facilities, constantly missiles and attacks on civilians. Of course, the enemy increases media pressure on Ukrainians and our partners. Of course, Russian propaganda's goal is to demoralize. Of course, all the nuclear blackmail is to intimidate. Of course, Putin imposes futile peace negotiations so as to deceive. And of course, Putin is doing his best worst to keep the occupied territories. Well, while Putin sits in the bunker in Russia and sends his doppelgangers to visit the scorched grounds the Russian army leaves behind, Volodymyr Zelenskyy pays a working visit to the very front line to Donetsk region.
I had talks with partners, including President Biden, primarily about arms supplies. I was in the area where these weapons will give more power, more protection to Ukrainians' lives, and bring our victory closer. This is the main thing. All our land will be free, all of it. I thank everyone who is now fighting for Ukraine, who is preparing for combat, who is on combat missions, who is at combat posts, all those who are recovering from injuries, all those who are training our warriors. Thank you all. I am proud of all of you. Glory to you, our heroes.
The motivation and actions of Russia at this stage are quite obvious, and this is good. It sends Ukraine and its partners a very clear signal we should be even more persistent in driving occupiers out of our homeland. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban finally has put it straightforwardly. He says Ukraine is no sovereign country, since it depends on Western support. Orban also says we in Ukraine are unable to defeat Russia because of the difference in the potentials of the two countries. Nor does Orban consider Putin a criminal, and he says the topics of war crimes should be discussed after the war, between him and Putin probably. I wonder if there are any Hungarians watching us right now, and if there are, please comment on the following. For us in Ukraine, it is nothing new that Orban methodically reproduces Putin's narratives, which of course calls into question, or better said, calls no questions, his personal Kremlin dependence as a politician and leader of a European country. Please, dear Hungarians, tell us Ukrainians, do you understand that Viktor Orban is clearly articulating the message to the outer bigger world on your behalf, on behalf of the whole Hungarian nation? It is on your behalf that Orban says, literally, we Hungarians are calling any country that accepts any support from its partners in times of a criminal war waged against it a dependent country. According to Orban's logic, if the Russians invaded Hungary, Hungarians would have to kneel. If the Russians invaded Hungary, says Orban, Hungarians would have accepted pitiful fate because Russia is bigger. If the Russians invaded Hungary, says Orban, Hungarians are an independent nation, but to a certain extent. If our partners from NATO offered us weapons to fight the invader, we Hungarians would proudly reject it. If you ask me, Hungary better apply the Article 5 of NATO, but not reject help. But according to this logic of Orban, if Russians invaded Hungary, says Orban, we Hungarians will let Russia invade Budapest, rape our women, abduct and murder our children because of the difference in the potential. If Russians invaded Hungary, says Orban, we Hungarians are aware. On contrary to President Zelenskyy, who rejected that option, I, Viktor Orban, would have chosen a ride and would have escaped to the United States. Maybe Dear Hungarian nation, it was not the best idea to delegate the rights to represent you in the outer world to such a cowardly Kremlin subordinate person as Viktor Orban. Just a question. What is to the difference in potential? Yes, Comrade Orban, you are right. There is a great difference in potential between Ukraine and Russia and Hungary, the way you have depicted it. And because of this difference, we survived. Because of this difference, the world helps us. And because of this difference, we fight and are not going to go Orban. And it is exactly because of this great difference in potential we're going to win. You measure Hungary's independence in dollars, while economic self-sufficiency is not an indispensable condition for political sovereignty. Otherwise, Hungary cannot be considered a sovereign state because it depends on EU subsidies just as well. We understand why you, Comrade Orban, deliberately underestimate the role and capabilities of Ukraine, a small country that has successfully accumulated resources for defense both within itself and accepted the world's help, yes. You have your Kremlin-made reason for that, but do you understand that the world looks at you, a politician for hire, and thinks the same of the whole Hungarian nation? Unlike you and the image of Hungary that you, Comrade Orban, have shaped, we in Ukraine will never accept slavery, whatever the difference in potential is. There is no such button that simply turns off the Ukrainian resistance to a brutal Russian aggression, genocide, ecocide and mass murderings. Because of the difference in potential, you did your bet on Russia in this war. That is fine, but what about the whole nation that is going to pay for your mistakes after Ukraine wins? Maybe it is time for Hungary to choose the right side in wars and stop being systematically blinded by the greatness of its political losers. Putin's crimes are a legally established fact. Punishment of criminals will be a natural result of the defeat of Kremlin's dictatorship. Then, Comrade Orban, you will witness the actual difference in potential. On June 28th, Ukraine marks the Constitution Day, adopted in 1996. The history of the constitutional process in Ukraine goes back to Kievan Rus, the one which existence the Kremlin denies. Nevertheless, of course, it existed without Kremlin's allowance to do so. Initially, our constitution was partly based on the ancient Ukrainian law Ruska Pravda and later Lithuanian statute, the acts of the Bogdan Khmelnytsky Cossack state period, articles of March or articles of Zaporizhia army. The first Ukrainian constitution is considered to be the Philip Orlyk's constitution, which was adopted on April 5, 1710. It was a contract between the Cossack commander Philip Orlyk and the Cossacks, which defined the rights and duties of all members of troops. According to historians, the constitution of Philip Orlyk is one of the first European constitutions. We in Ukraine never forget that, as per our constitution, the rule of law, integrity and inviolability of the country's territory, the European and Euro-Atlantic course of our state is clearly stated. Ukraine's fight in this war is a fight for the rule of law, freedom and democracy on its territory, which is encroached upon by the occupiers. Also, we will never forget nor forgive a Russian missile attack on Kramatorsk on the evening of 27th of June, where the death toll has risen to 10 people, including children, one 17-year-old and two 14-year-old sisters. In total, more than 60 people injured. Unlike many post-Soviet countries where Soviet doctrine has actually won, Ukraine has managed to preserve democracy, freedom, a strong plurally voiced civil society, even in the face of Russia's external military aggression. This is what we are fighting for, freedom, and against Russian terror. This is why we say Russia is a failed state, autocratic, totalitarian and terrorist, where laws do not apply and lies and disinformation production has been taken to an industrial scale. The terror and lawlessness inherent in it were brought by invaders to the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Ukraine's fight in this war is a fight for the rule of law, freedom and democracy on its territory, which is encroached upon by the occupiers. It was Henry Keane on UATV State Channel bringing the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment. Let us know what you think on the matter and why. Your opinion matters to us the most. Take care and stay tuned for more. See you.